One of my oldest and dearest friends called me admitting that he didn't realize how much Ozzy's death would affect him. I get it. Ozzy was a part of my life practically all my life. I remember him as a young man when I was a kid. I watched him age, and I could gauge where I'll be then, in another 14 years. And I remember how I felt when Freddie Mercury died, and my youth went with him. And then Lemmy died, and took something deeper from me. Interestingly, Lemmy and Ozzy both did this song called I Ain't No Nice Guy. They've done a number of collaborations, but I particularly liked that one because when that came out, I was realizing a similar sort of a thing. I ain't no nice guy after all. We all used to think that we were the shit when we were young, and I don't think anyone ever realizes that they are the bad guy when they are the bad guy. But at some point, you look back on the way you were, and you're like, damn. So I appreciated that song very much. I knew always, of course, that Ozzy's death was coming, but how hard it would hit me still came as a surprise. My wife and I were in a restaurant somewhere all alone, had the place to ourselves for whatever reason, and I heard the waitress talking to the manager, and they said, yeah, the Ozzy Osbourne died. And I went, what was that? And they said, Ozzy Osbourne just died. And they saw how that hit me. I couldn't speak for a minute. I just stared, and I thanked them for saying so. And then they played one of his songs in the restaurant. How often do you hear Ozzy Osbourne playing in a restaurant? And since we had the place to ourselves, they kept it going until finally some other patrons showed up. And until that happened, one of the waitresses or the counter person that didn't look like the sort of, it was a young girl. It didn't look like the sort of person that would have ever heard an Ozzy song. And so I took a moment to explain as the music is playing, wait till we get to this guitar riff or whatever. And I tried to tell her what this music meant to me, how much it touched me, affected who I am. And then, of course, more people came in. We had to listen like regular music. And he just did his final concert. And is that a heartbreaking thing? Seeing him in that chair like that, where he denied the use of his painkillers because he needed to be lucid. Ozzy needs to be lucid for his fans in order to be able to do this thing the right way. And anybody that watched it in that last song when he's sitting in his throne and he says, "This one's not for you. This one's for Sharon." We all saw it coming, but it was touchy as hell. And this time his last concert really was his last concert. He says, I'll only retire the day I should be dead, and they have me buried, and some idiot spell over my casket, some stupid gospel stuff. It's a silly reaction to be shocked by the death of somebody who's 76 years old and had Parkinson's. But it's understandable because we lived most of our lives, shocked that Ozzy was still alive after all the drugs and near-death calls. This isn't even the first time he died. I remember seeing the news that Ozzy was pronounced dead after he flipped an ATV over on himself and broke his neck. Doctors brought him back from the dead, and then he started Ozfest. I took my kids to Ozfest year after year, and to the Black Sabbath reunion shows too, because I want to be a good dad, because that's not the way I grew up. I've always regarded Ozzy as deeply flawed, a chaos and contradiction. Someone who was at once maddening and lovable, despicable and admirable, a regular guy doing a pretty good job, all things considered. We don't expect rock stars to be intellectuals, after all. So he's doing all right when he's not also sabotaging himself. And interestingly, I like to think that some of us get wiser in our old age. That should be the goal anyway. Not all of us make it. But it seems that he was headed that way, because he made these observations himself. So the lifestyle I've been living for the last 30 years, I could have been dead 1,000 times. And about the drugs, every time I did drugs, I would come close to death. It got to the point where I would worry about choking on my own vomit, so I have to sleep face down. Even to this day, I'm very lucky to be alive, and I realize that. Nearly all the friends I used to get pissed with are now dead. I'm living on borrowed time. I don't really see those things as defining him, though. He never pretended to have always made the right choices. Matter of fact, one of the things that he said that I liked was, he said one of his greatest regrets was what a terrible husband and father he was to his first wife. So this is one of the things that he realized, and I think it's important. If you're going to have redemption, and I believe in redemption, you've got to be able to admit that you fucked up. And and the people in his life at that time kind of need to hear that too. So Ozzy just wanted to make people happy with his music and take their minds off their troubles for a while, and that's how he became a part of so many people's lives. He meant a lot to many people, and I've been reflecting on what he meant to me over the past week since his passing. I didn't become a rock star after hearing Ozzy for the first time like Lita Ford did when she was 13, sneaking into a Black Sabbath concert. And she said, that was the day, the night, the light bulb went off over my head, and I thought, this is what I have to do. And that night, I came out of there, and I knew I was going to do what I was going to do with my future. He inspired people in many ways, including me. Imagine being a kid in the early 70s. Let's paint a picture of what that's like. If a man's hair is long enough that you couldn't see the top of his collar or the top of his ears, then that man is untrustworthy, probably criminal, definitely on drugs. And he should clean himself up because men having long hair was somehow filthy. I was a little kid whose divorced and flighty parents had me bouncing around the country to see both of them separately as they both moved around like nomads and refused to live anywhere near each other. And I spent a lot of my summers kind of in the middle, stuck with deeply religious grandparents in a tiny farming community. Try to understand the environment I grew up in. My grandparents thought that the bad boys of music were the Rat Pack of Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. But my grandparents preferred safer, less threatening music than Sinatra and Dean Martin. So they watched the Lawrence Welk Show every night on the only TV in the house. They seemed to be afraid of everything, and they judged everyone who wasn't just like them. And I could tell even as a little kid that if I didn't keep quiet, they'll soon judge me too. And they did, of course, on everything I said that didn't match their prejudice. Then I went back to my mom, who usually lived somewhere around Los Angeles where everyone was much more open-minded. And there were rock stations in the big city. And some of them, on rare occasions, would play a track from Sabotage or Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath. And this music spoke to me louder than anything else could, resonating both literally and figuratively. Like people of many different generations, I was a Sabbath fan at 13 years old. But for me, that was 1975. Theirs was empowering music. Ozzy could bite the head off of Lawrence Welk. And when I was 19, I remember the rock stations advertising Black Sabbath's frontman, Ozzy Osbourne, with such gravitas for the Blizzard of Oz tour. It was just no other type of music to compete with that. I remember the other teenagers of my time commenting that this is the best music ever, a new genre of music invented by Ozzy and Sabbath. And Ozzy's breakout solo albums were nothing short of amazing. This is one of my favorite albums, still to this day, but Diary of a Madman is one of my top 10 favorite songs ever. That man could write music. The way he integrated masterful heavy metal guitar with an orchestra and a choir and a church bell. It took all my lifelong disdain for religious bigotry and turned it into a horror movie soundtrack that swept me up into it. Here's a funny story he told in this book. The Jesus freaks were the worst. While the suicidal solution case was going through the courts, they followed me around everywhere. They would picket my shows with signs that read, "The Antichrist is here," and always be chanting, put Satan behind you and put Jesus in front of you. And one time, I made my own sign, a smiley face with the words, "Have a nice day." And I went out and joined them. They didn't even notice. Then, just as the gig was about to start, I put the sign down and said, "See you guys," and went back to my dressing room. I've read a couple of biographies of Ozzy and Sabbath, and I'm now starting to see articles about whether Ozzy believed in God or was he Christian. Like this Christian blog from a few days ago starts out with the 1971 lyrics from the Black Sabbath song "After Forever," and I knew this one would come up because I've commented about this often. Have you ever thought about your soul? Can it be saved? Or perhaps you think that when you're dead, you just stay in your grave. Is God just a thought within your head, or is he part of you? Is Christ just a name that you read in a book when you were in school? Well, I've seen the truth. Yes, I've seen the light, and I've changed my ways. And I'll be prepared when you're lonely and scared at the end of your days. Could it be that you're afraid of what your friends might say if they knew you believed in God above? They should realize before they criticize that God is the only way to love. What it doesn't tell you is that Geezer Butler actually wrote those lyrics. Geezer is Catholic, and yes, it's about the tired trope of finding faith on your deathbed. He said, it's about losing your faith. People think that when they've lost their faith and then they're on their deathbed, what are they going to do on the deathbed? Are they going to get their faith and suddenly believe in the whole thing again or not? But as you can see from what Ozzy actually said from back then to today, Ozzy's views have changed over time. In an interview with Spin in 1986, he said, I'm a Christian. I was Christian as a Christian. I used to go to Sunday school. I never took much interest in it because I didn't. And in a 2005 Playboy interview, he said this about life after death. I don't know. Nobody's ever come back and said, hey, it's pretty cool up there. Or, it's hotter than fucking shit down here. You got to shovel coal. I don't think I believe in that stuff. It's for people with morals. And lastly, in his book, I Am Ozzy, published in 2009, he said, the funny thing is, I'm actually quite interested in the Bible. I've tried to read it several times, but I only ever got as far as the bit about Moses being 720 years old. I'm like, what were those people smoking back then? The bottom line is, I don't believe there's a bloke in a white suit who sits on a fluffy cloud any more than I believe in a bloke called the devil with a 3-pronged fork and a couple of horns. But I believe that there's day, there's night, there's good, there's bad, there's black, there's white. If there's a God, it's nature. If there's a devil, it's nature. Which brings us back to the end of his life, because I know that just like Darwin, Christians will try to work him into their mythologies. They tell themselves to prove their faith in God is real. They'll say that he ended his last concert back to the beginning by saying, God bless you. But the truth is that his religious beliefs are a bit more complicated than that. And what are you supposed to say at the end of a concert, especially when you've been doing this one tagline your whole life? I think Ozzy went the way of Kirk and Spock. There was a time when Bill Shatner and Leonard Nimoy were both religious people. They sometimes conflicted with the story writers in Star Trek. Over their religious beliefs. It's happened a couple of times. But then late in life, both men independently realized they don't really believe that anymore. And I think Ozzy took that route too. I've seen Ozzy's final concerts at least a couple times. I saw Judas Priest's farewell concert too, but then they always come back and I'll see the next farewell concert after that. And I saw Black Sabbath's final concert called The End back in 2016. Took my boys. And that's when the Catholic lyricist Geezer Butler complained that Ozzy wanted to perform his new song, God is Dead. And now Black Sabbath has done yet another final concert, and now the Prince of Darkness is dead. And Ozzy said a lot of funny things, because he was a funny guy. If you ever saw his concerts, they would always do like these series of videos that they would make prior to the show. So before Ozzy takes the stage, you get to see all of these little shorts, and they're all funny as hell. But Ozzy said, when I go, I don't want there to be any morbid fucking crying people. I want people to celebrate my life. Get me in the ground as soon as you can. You can cry all you want, but I ain't coming back. I don't think there's any fucking return tickets.
Ozzy, there you go. Look. Tiny bubbles.
Bubbles! Oh, come on, Sharon. I'm fucking Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of fucking Darkness. Evil, what's fucking evil? I've had a bollard of fucking bubbles then.
Damn it, who's going to die now? Has anybody left?